Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer. Welcome to episode 185 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. On this show, we discuss the craft and the art of game mastering. I've been running RPGs for over 25 years now, and I produce this show in the hopes that you can benefit from my experience, my triumphs, and my mistakes. This episode is the second in my series of behind-the-screen DM commentary episodes on my new D&D campaign, Hinterlands of Elandria. So this is a campaign I am streaming on my YouTube channel, so you can go watch the actual play of the actual game sessions. And these behind-the-screen DM commentary episodes are companions to that campaign, in which I discuss all the GMing aspects of the campaign. Today, I am talking about some of the preliminary preparation I did before the first game session and even before character creation. So this is the audio of a live stream I did on YouTube. So I asked listeners if you would like these to be part of the podcast, and those of you that I heard from said that you would. So here we are. And if you would like to see video for this, you can head to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Starwalker Studios, and you can watch the video instead of listening to just the audio if you'd like. Or you can find the video embedded in the show notes for this episode over at starwalkerstudios.com. So this is going to be another fairly long episode today. So without further ado, let's start discussing preparation of the campaign, Hinterlands of Elandria. So we just started running this campaign a couple weeks ago. We've done 2 sessions. We also did preludes, and we have videos for all that here on the YouTube channel that you can check out. And I also did a video giving an introduction to my setting of Primordia that we're playing the game in. So these videos, these commentary videos, are a chance to go behind the screen and take a look at the campaign from the DM's perspective, from my perspective. And my hope is that this can be a way for newer GMs and any GMs really to talk about what I'm doing and see what I'm doing, and hopefully be useful for GMs wondering, how to set up and run their own campaign, how to run a game, all that kind of stuff. I produce a podcast, Game Master's Journey, in which we've talked a lot about the art and the art of being a game master, and had a lot of really great conversations about that. But it's all kind of theoretical stuff, and I think it's a lot more useful and easier to learn by example than just this kind of theoretical discussion. So I thought it would be cool to in addition to having actual play of my campaign that you can watch just for entertainment purposes, for those of you GMs out there to have these videos where we can kind of dig into what's going on behind the scenes or behind the screen, and maybe learn something. Which is not to say that I'm a great GM or the best GM. Hopefully I'm a passable GM, but I think you can learn from others' mistakes as well as from the things that they do right. And even if you don't agree with something I do, if you ask me, hey, Lex, why'd you do this thing this way? And I explain my reasoning, even if you don't agree with it, you might still learn something from it, or might give you an idea or whatever. So we'll see how this goes. So today is the first in the series of episodes. And because I'm going to be really going behind the scenes of the campaign, there's the very real possibility of spoilers for players in the campaign, as well as spoilers for people watching the campaign who don't want to be spoiled on, the storyline or what's going on or things like that. So because of that, once I start getting into discussing the actual game sessions, those will be kind of time shifted a bit, which is to say I won't be releasing the discussion of the first game session until we've gotten to a point in the campaign where there won't be any spoilers in that behind the screen. I hope that makes sense. So when I release these episodes, I will clearly tell you in the title of the video which of the actual play sessions we're discussing that day, so that you can keep it straight. So today I'm going to be talking about some of the prep I did for the campaign, some of the behind the scenes stuff before we even started playing. And I went through my notes today, and I went through them a couple times, and I don't see any spoilers in here for the first couple sessions or anything at this point. So if you're watching the actual play or you're a player, you should be safe watching this. There shouldn't be any spoilers in what I'm talking about today, which is why I decided to live stream it. The rest of the videos in these series may or may not be live streamed. Let me know if you like the live stream format or not. But as we go forward, probably less and less of them will be, just because I'm going to have to time shift them. Now, the other way I could do it is I could just wait to produce those videos until there's no spoilers. But I think it will be better if I produce the video while the game session is still kind of strong in my mind because it just happened, than waiting 6 weeks to produce a video about a game session 6 weeks ago and maybe I don't remember everything, even if I took notes. So yeah, so that's what we're doing. So my hope is that this will be useful to other GMs to kind of dig into what I'm doing and why. And I'm really hoping that this will be an interactive kind of thing. I really hope to hear from you, questions and comments about things happening in the campaign. And as we go forward with this series, I can more and more pull in that feedback into the actual discussions. So if you're watching the actual play and you have any questions or comments about what's going on in the actual play, please let me know in the comments for the actual play videos. I'm planning to go to those comments on YouTube when I'm preparing the commentary for that video, so that I can answer questions and address things people are wondering about. On the other hand, if you have any questions today about what I'm talking about today, feel free to post them or any comments in our chat channel for the YouTube Live that you should be able to access right now. And I'll refer to that, and I'll try to answer some or all of those questions at the end of this video. So today, in the efforts to be able to put one of these out to show you kind of what I'm hoping to do with this, and to have a beginning to this series, and at the same time avoid spoiling players or people watching the series, I thought I would talk about some of the preliminary stuff that I did behind the scenes before gameplay even started. So this is the kind of stuff, if I don't talk about it, no one will ever know about it, because it's not something you're going to see in the actual play, because this is all from the beginning. So I get a lot of questions from listeners of Game Master's Journey about, how I come up with adventures, how I create campaigns, how I link different adventures together in different game sessions. And it seems like with newer GMs, people don't so much have issues grasping the mechanics of the system of whatever game they're running, or if they do, they're finding those answers other places. But what people really want to know about is more storytelling. more how do I craft a story around the player characters? How do I motivate player characters to actually participate in the story I've come up with? How do I connect different stories together into a larger arc and those kinds of things? So really, it seems to me like a lot of the questions I get and a lot of the requests of things to talk about really have to do with storytelling, which is not something limited just to running games. Storytelling is used in a lot of different ways. Writers and producers and all kinds of people out there are storytellers. So storytelling itself is its own discipline, and there's a lot of types of storytelling, and we can learn things from all of them and apply it to running games. So at the very beginning, the first steps in starting this campaign, creating this campaign, was just kind of thinking in general terms, what kind of concepts I want to feature, what's what kind of story do I want to tell, what's the environment going to be like? For instance, so I have a homebrew world, Primordia, that I've been developing for D&D for a couple years now. And so I knew I wanted it to be in Primordia. I wanted to do an original campaign, original story, and I wanted to use my setting I've been working on. I've been focusing a lot of my world building efforts on a specific city in the world called Elandria and the region around that. So I knew I wanted to feature Elandria and kind of focus on Elandria in that area because I wanted to further flesh out and develop that part of the world and that city. And I also knew that I wanted to play around with some ideas and concepts from Wes March's style of campaigns. And this is the term coined by Ben Robbins, creator of the game Microscope. And he talks about it quite a bit on his blog. And I've done quite a few episodes of Game Master's Journey about Wes March's, so you can go check out Game Master's Journey at starwalkerstudios.com to learn more about Wes March's. And in the show notes of those episodes, I have links to the various blog episodes that Ben wrote. But in a nutshell, Wes March's is a very exploration-focused kind of campaign. And some of the concepts or some of the themes or ideas from Wes March's that I wanted to focus on is exploration, specifically wilderness exploration, because I thought it would be fun and nice and organic and synergistic, if that's a word, to as the player characters explore the world, the players and myself as the DM are exploring the world and fleshing it out and expanding on it. And we're all kind of doing this together. And I thought that would be really cool. Another concept of Wes March's that I wanted to pull in is a more almost serialized format where instead of having these huge story arcs that go over multiple game sessions, it's more serialized, even to the point where each game session is almost like its own self-contained episode. I don't want to go that far with it because we only play for 3 hours at a time. So it'd be pretty rough trying to make a 3-hour session a self-contained little thing. And a big part of why Ben Robbins did it that way was because he was using a large pool of players and he might not have the same players at the table every time. So he wanted to facilitate having different characters at the table every time. And I don't have that to deal with. I have 6 players and only 6 players. So one of the reasons I have 6 players is I like to have a couple extra players, especially for online games in case people can't make it. And I do have some ideas of ways to keep the game going, even if I have numerous players missing a given session, which that's something I can definitely talk about in later episodes of the series. But I don't think I'll go into that today. So that was a part, like, I like the serialized idea as far as instead of having this huge plot that's going to take years of play to go through. I like the idea of having smaller stories that tie together to tell a larger story. Another aspect of West Marches I'm using for inspiration for this campaign is a more kind of sandbox approach where the players have a lot of freedom to do what they want and go where they want. Because it's an exploration focused campaign, it's going to be basically a setup where they have a home base and everything around it is kind of unknown and unexplored. So as they pursue whatever storylines or quest lines or whatever they want to pursue, they're also going to be exploring this area, discovering things, and turning this unexplored region into an explored region. So those are some of the ideas from West Marches that I wanted to pull in, but I'm not trying to recreate a Ben Robbins West Marches campaign. I'm not going to be bound to that one idea of how to run a campaign. Instead, I'm using it as one of my numerous kind of inspirations and ideas that I'm building the campaign from. So as we go through this, further through this, you'll probably see areas where it's like, oh, what Lex is doing right there is very West Marches. And then you'll see other things that I'm doing that aren't at all West Marches. For instance, the way that I handle, quote, random encounters, encounter tables, stuff like that. I'm kind of doing it the way I always do it. I kind of have my own style that I run D&D. That's the way I've done it for 2.5 decades now. So I got some new ideas from the West Marches thing, but honestly, a lot of it is stuff I've done before. It's just kind of a shift in focus, if that makes any sense. And really, I think part of the reason I like the West Marches idea so much is because it does so much go back to the way I ran D&D in second edition. And so for me, it's more, it's not so much, oh, let's try this brand new style of campaign I've never tried before, this new style of gameplay. It's not so much that, it's more, hey, let's get back to my roots of how I ran D&D in second edition and take the aspects of that I really liked and that I think worked well and bring that back to the way I've been running D&D for the last couple of years. So I wanted to bring in some of these West Marches concepts. And I've talked about this on previous videos and on the podcast, so I don't want to too much like go over old ground, but I don't want people to have to go listen to a bunch of podcast episodes to make sense of this video as well. So I have to lay a little groundwork here. So in my world of Primordia, which you can learn a lot more in the first video in this playlist, the Hinterlands of Elandria playlist, is all about Primordia. But one of the features of this world is that there was a cataclysm of sorts about 5 years ago that led to humanity and the other, quote, civilized races, or the goodly races, whatever you want to call them, the player character races, basically, retreating to a handful of ancient cities that have various magical protections. And pretty much everything other than those handful of cities, as far as civilization, has been lost due to massive and ubiquitous natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, things like that, as well as numerous interplanar rifts opening to all kinds of planes and worlds and monsters and things pouring out of them. So all this stuff together led to any city or town or village that wasn't protected by these ancient magical protections basically being wiped out. And over the past 5 years, everything other than these handful of settlements has been wiped out, or it's at least that's what people think, or to the best of their knowledge, that's the case. So my these cities that are left are connected together by these very special portals, magical portals that connect one city to another. And that's how all travel and trade happens now. People don't travel on roads or rivers or seas between one place and another anymore because the world is just too dangerous. So because of all that, just an out of the box West Marches thing doesn't really make sense. So the first thing I had to do was come up with a way to do this kind of exploration campaign in my world of Primordia that would work and make sense. So one of the aspects of a West Marches campaign is that the player characters have some kind of home base, usually a small settlement like a village or a small town, or maybe even just a keep or a fort that's relatively, quote, safe, where they can return to and restock, resupply, exchange information with other player characters that maybe weren't on the latest expedition and things like that. And this home base is surrounded by unexplored wilderness. And so the player characters take forays, expeditions out into the wilderness, explore, have adventures, whatever, and then they come back to the home base. So the obvious answer there is for me to say, well, the home base is Elandria. And boom, problem solved, right? Well, as I thought about it, I realized that wouldn't really work really well, well, it's not that it wouldn't work. It's just, it's not what I wanted to do because Elandria is a city. Now, it's not a metropolis like Waterdeep. It's not like that unrealistically large for a world like this, or at least a world like mine. But it's a city, you know? So the thing with a city is you could have a whole campaign that takes place within a city, right? And there's a lot of potential for adventure in the city. And one of Ben Robbins' ideas for his West Marches campaign was he didn't want to have adventures in the town. He wanted adventure to be out in the wilderness because, again, the point of the campaign, the focus of the campaign was exploration of the wilderness. So, you know, if you want to tell a wilderness exploration story, but you have a home base where there's all this stuff going on and you could just have adventures upon adventures without ever leaving town, you're kind of defeating yourself, right? You're kind of crossing purposes there. So for those reasons, I didn't want to I didn't want to have the home base be Elandria. And the other side of it is, if the home base is Elandria, then I really need to really flesh out and develop the city, or at least parts of it, because we're going to be spending a lot of time there. And again, I want to have a wilderness exploration story, and I want to be able to focus my efforts as a GM on developing the wilderness and not on the city. So for those reasons, I decided, you know, I really need the home base to be not Elandria, and ideally to be a small settlement like a village would be ideal. But I had this problem of, well, there are no villages. All the villages have been destroyed. So what do I do? And, you know, for me, a big part of developing adventures and campaigns is coming up with an idea of what I want to do, the story I want to tell, and starting to, you know, come up with different ideas and put the pieces together. And then every now and then just stepping back from the thing and looking for holes, looking for plot holes or logical inconsistencies, you know, things that don't make sense, things that don't add up, things that a clever player are going to start picking at and being like, wait a minute, you know, something's not right here. Right. So I can't just put a village out there and call it a day because, well, that doesn't really make sense in the setting that I've established. So I came up with this idea of there is a village still. There's one village still, and it has survived the last 5 years all on its own somehow. And in the very beginning stages, I didn't know the somehow because you know, in order to start developing the campaign, I didn't right away need to know, well, how did the village survive, right? Now, that's something I want to know by the time the player characters start investigating that problem, so I have an answer for them. But until then, I don't necessarily have to know. And for me, something I've learned in my years of world building and story building is almost a discipline, I guess, a self-discipline to try to keep yourself focused on what you need to accomplish right now. Always have a goal. You know, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to accomplish? What's my purpose? And try to focus on that and try to avoid getting distracted or going down rabbit holes or going down tangents that aren't necessary right now. So for instance, I need to have a village. Okay, there's a village out there. It survived somehow. Don't know how yet. And now we can go from there. Right now, I don't really need to know what the somehow is. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time worrying about that. I'm going to focus on what do I need for my first game session. And once I got that down, then I can start worrying about how is this village here anyway, right? Because I don't need to know that necessarily for the first game session. So for me, that's a big thing is always have a goal and always be focused on that goal. In my work in science, like I've done a lot of experiments and for those of you that have done experiments, whether as a scientist or maybe just in your science class in college or high school, and you probably know what I'm talking about, but part of science is documentation. You have to document everything that you do, and you usually have some kind of laboratory manual or notebook that you're keeping notes in about your experiments and what's going on. And every time you begin a new experiment in your notebook, the first thing you write down after the title of the experiment is the purpose. What am I trying to accomplish here? A lot of times the purpose of a scientific experiment is a hypothesis that you're investigating. Is this true or not? But every experiment you do has a purpose, and you can't really start an experiment before you know what the purpose is, right? And maybe that's kind of colored my thinking, but I think that's exactly the case in RPGs. And I do the same thing. Like when I design an adventure or when I design an encounter or a scene, the first question I always ask myself is, what is the purpose? So an encounter, what is the purpose of this encounter? And I'll talk about this more when I start talking about the individual sessions, which I've actually already written my notes for those for these videos. And one of the things I talk about is, okay, for this encounter, here is my purpose. Okay. For instance, my purpose for this encounter is to show the players that the world is dangerous. So that purpose guides everything I do and don't do when it comes to that encounter. Same thing with an adventure or a campaign or a village, right? What's the purpose of this village? Well, the purpose of the village is to be a home base for the player characters, a place they can return to between adventures, a place where they can rest and resupply. Another purpose is to be a source of adventure hooks or quests. More and more, I find myself using video game terminology, which is this interesting thing. Because if you played early, especially like MMOs and RPGs, early games like EverQuest, well, I'm trying to think of games that weren't actual D&D games, but like EverQuest is a perfect example. Which World of Warcraft, WoW, is basically an EverQuest clone. So EverQuest was the original WoW. But it's funny because those games grew out of D&D, and you play those games and you see a lot of ideas and terms and concepts are coming directly from D&D. And now here I am in D&D using the video game terms to discuss what I'm doing in D&D. But when it comes to nice little terms for things, they've got it nailed and they get the concepts really well. So getting back to the purpose of my village, my purpose of my village, to use a video game term, is to be a quest hub. It's a place where the player characters can acquire adventure hooks, where they can acquire quests. Hey, here's something you can go explore. Here's something you can go do. There's rumored to be a treasure in this place and things like that. So I can provide them with various hooks to adventure. And again, I want this to be a more sandboxy campaign. So it's not a thing of, oh, you have one quest to do. It's like, no, you have ideally numerous quests that you could pursue, and it's up to you which ones you want to pursue and which ones not. So those are some of the purposes of the village. So I came up with this idea. There's a village out there somewhere. Don't know why yet or how yet, but it's out there. And somehow it survived all by itself, isolated from all other settlements, since the retreat, which is the name for when the civilized races retreated to this handful of cities during the cataclysms called the breaking of the world and the time of the rifts, kind of two different cataclysms that happened at the same time. So hang on, I lost my train of thought here. So this village is isolated. So unlike this handful of cities that have portals that connect them, presumably the village is completely isolated. And the city of Elandria is having a lot of problems because during the retreat, a lot of refugees came in. So since then, they're dealing with crime and overpopulation and food shortages and all this kind of stuff because there's just way too many people in the city, but they don't have a solution because there's nowhere else for people to go. So when the powers that be in the city of Elandria find out that there might be a village out there somewhere, they're very skeptical of that. But if it's true, there could be a key to their own survival there, because presumably this village isn't connected to other places with portals. So somehow it's sustaining itself, which, Elandria can't do. And presumably it doesn't have the magical protections that Elandria and the other cities do, because these protections were created with an ancient magic that's been lost. And they've only been found around really ancient cities from that time, thousands of years ago. So, presumably a village hasn't been around that long and was too small and inconsequential to warrant the resources to craft these magical protections around it. So if it survived, it must have some other way that it survived. And maybe this is something that Elandria and the other cities can use so that they can start to expand and establish colonies and start to have more settlements again for places for people to live and places that can start to produce food and other things that the cities need. So even though it seems highly unlikely, this is something that the queen and the other officials in the city of Elandria would want to investigate. So this is kind of the foundation I'm setting up for the campaign. So I needed to do this kind of West Marches style exploration campaign. I needed a home base. I didn't want it to be a city. I wanted it to be a village. So, hey, let's come up with a village, but now we have to figure out how that works, and also build a story around it and create a story with blanks and loose ends that can be explored by the players and their characters. So I have this idea of this village. I figure it's about 3 days or so travel from the city. The reason for that figure, it's completely a gameplay reason. I want it to be far enough away that the player characters can't just go back to Elandria whenever they want. If it were like 8 hours travel away, like they could just go back to the city all the time whenever they want. So I want it to be far enough away that they're not going to be going back to the city all the time. But I want it to be close enough that if they need to go back to the city, they can. But at least at lower levels, it will be an adventure in and of itself, just getting back to the city. So yeah, I figured about 3 days was a good figure for that. So I have these basic concepts and I need to start building a story around it and start integrating the player characters into it. And at this point, I don't even have player characters yet. I don't even know. At this point, I don't even think I knew who my players were, and I definitely didn't know what kind of characters they were going to be playing. But I don't need that yet. So I start thinking through, how this is going to work out, And my first idea was that some kind of NPC, some kind of person was out in the wilds all by themselves, even though people don't really do that anymore, and saw this village, came back to Elandria and went to the queen and said, hey, I saw a village out there with people in it. But this person or entity, whoever they were, was an unreliable witness, someone where just the fact that this information is coming from this specific person, people tend not to believe it just for that reason. And then you add in that what they're talking about seems so unlikely, and most people just discount it. And the reason I wanted that is what I call the Forgotten Realms problem. Which is like in Forgotten Realms, perfect example of this is the new storyline, Tomb of Annihilation, in which there's something going on where anyone who's been resurrected is now dying of a sickness, and resurrection magic isn't working anymore. Blah 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 blah. And this is an adventure for first level characters, and first level characters are supposed to be supposed to care about this, even though it's unclear why they would, and want to investigate this and solve this problem. And right away, you have what I call the Forgotten Realms problem, which is, well, what about Elminster? What about Dritz? What about the Seven Sisters? What about all these ridiculously powerful NPCs that we know about that exist in Forgotten Realms, who have maybe been resurrected themselves, or likely know someone who has, who would be much more motivated to find out what's going on with this than first level characters, and would have much better ability to do so? Why aren't they taking care of this problem? Why is this group of first level characters no one's ever heard of going to save the world when we have all these much more capable people out there? And again, these are just people we know about from official products and fiction and whatnot. Then you think about all the high level player characters that exist in the world, and it's even more of a problem. So the Forgotten Realms problem is definitely more of a problem in a place for the Forgotten Realms than it is in other places. But in any setting, it's something to think about. Even in Primordia, the player characters aren't the only adventurers in the world. I have an organization, the Guild of Adventurers, that's made up of adventurers, and there are people much higher up in the guild than the players, so which is to say higher level. So in Primordia, there are higher level adventurers than the first or second level player characters. So, right away when I come up with this idea, I need to figure out, why isn't someone more capable handling this? Why are a group of greenhorns going to go deal with this problem instead of someone that could just cast a couple spells and be done with it, right? This is something we got to think about. So the way I decided to handle that is, well, the information is coming from an unreliable source. The idea that there's a village out there somewhere is frankly considered impossible by pretty much everyone. It's only the most gullible or open-minded person who thinks this is even a possibility. However, on the other hand, the slim potential that it could be true is too attractive to ignore, because if it is true, this could solve the city's problems, right? So on the one hand, it's like, this is probably total bullshit and isn't worth our time to investigate. But on the other hand, well, it's so compelling that we kind of have to, even though we think it's bullshit. So I thought that made sense of, well, let's not send one of our high level teams of very skilled adventurers. Let's not send our high dollar assets to investigate this. Let's instead invest as little as possible in investigating this, while still sending people that, if there is truth to this, will be capable of uncovering that. So that's kind of what I decided to run with, and what I eventually, through various iterations, came up with. I never did come up with an idea for this NPC messenger that I really liked, with a good reason for why they're out there all by themselves and how they survived. And I, at the same time, I wanted, I came up with the idea that that not only would this be an adventure for low-level adventurers, but it'd be an adventure for people who aren't even adventurers yet. And I came up with this idea of the guild isn't even willing to risk one of their proven adventurer teams that are maybe second, third, fourth level, something like that. They're not even willing to risk the low rank adventurers for this. So instead, they look to their pool of people who are not adventurers, but maybe want to become adventurers or just would have skills that would make them a good adventurer. And they want to use those people. So if they go die horribly in the wilds, who cares? We didn't lose actual guild members. We lost potential guild members, which are a dime a dozen. So as part of this, I came up with an idea of a sponsor, someone who's a member of the guild who knows these various people who aren't members of the guild, who aren't professional adventurers, but who have various skills that could be useful as an adventurer, and is an NPC that can tie the various player characters together and kind of answer the question of, well, how did this particular group of people come together? So as I came up with this idea of the sponsor, and as I started developing the actual personage of the who this sponsor is, I had the idea that it would be cool if this person could do prophecy of some kind, which is to say, I shouldn't say could do. She's not going to be spouting prophecies, but someone who can kind of see into the future a little bit, can see other places like scrying, that kind of thing. And as I decided that would be cool for this NPC just to be able to bring in later plot hooks or as a possible source of information for some things that are going on in the campaign that are going to be really hard for the player characters to learn about. As I came up with all this, I thought, well, hey, why don't I, instead of having this NPC wanderer that I can't figure out a good concept for anyway, who brings this information, why not have this NPC who's the sponsor, who's like a seer? Maybe she has a vision or sees the village out there. And so that's what I decided to ultimately do. And this part of it was pretty late. Was actually after we started making characters that I had the idea of, let's have the sponsor be the one that thinks there's a village out there. So she had a village or a vision, and she's a little bit more reliable of a witness than I'd like, because she's a member of the guild, in good standing and all that. But I thought, well, since she had a dream, it still makes it unreliable enough, because not everybody's going to believe a dream, even from someone who in the past has proven to have dreams that are accurate, right? There's still going to be some doubt there. So I came up with this NPC that's the sponsor in the guild. Her name is Druinda. And I decided that what happened was Druinda has this dream about this village. She believes that it's a true dream. It's a dream of something that's real. She goes and she tells the queen about the dream, and the queen is intrigued because of, like I said, the possible benefit if this is a real thing. But the queen's advisors are all very skeptical and don't think this is possible. As Druinda is telling the queen about this in the court, there's also some representatives of the Guild of Adventurers there, and they hear this, and they're slightly less skeptical than the queen's advisors about this, but still skeptical enough that like I said, they're not going to send their own people to look into it. Druinda, on the other hand, being the one who had the dream, has complete conviction that this is a real thing, and is convinced and wants to prove and help the city by, hey, let's figure out what's going on with this village. So she goes to the guild and says, hey, look, I know that you guys don't completely believe my dream, and you're not willing to risk resources of the guild to investigate it. I would like, on my own, to put together a new team of adventurers from non-guild members and send them to go after this. And she gets the guild's blessing to do so. So now I have a way to bring the player characters together, and the players can be free in their character concepts, and they don't necessarily have to worry about how does my character know these other characters? How did we meet? That kind of stuff. Like, I can facilitate that through this woman that brings them together. And I'm very much picturing something like Ocean's 11 or Leverage, where this adventuring team, each person has their role that they fill in the team. And Druinda, basically through her interactions with people in the city, has kind of this laundry list of people she's met that she thinks have potential as adventurers who aren't yet adventurers. And so she handpicks from that list of people that have various skills that together would form a team that would be capable of undertaking this mission out into the wilderness. So not only does this give a reason for the player characters to know each other and work together without the players having to come up with that, it also gives them a tie to the guild so that they can become part of the guild. And it also, I have this seer character now that can be a source for information and quests and whatnot in the future. And I had another point there. What was I going to say? I'm blanking. Yeah. So, well, anyway, we'll just move on. So that's the basic, setup. Oh, I remember where I was going now. Sorry about that. So the other, cool thing about this is, it gives an in-story reason why this group of characters would fit together really well as far as their various skills. So again, like a heist team, you've got your tough, you've got your grifter, you've got your hacker, you've got your person that can, open safes and stuff like that. Your demolitions expert, right? Like, everybody has a very specific role and they're each the best at what they do. And I wanted that kind of thing with this team. It's like, who's the best healer who isn't yet an adventurer? Who's the best survivalist that isn't an actual adventurer, and things like that. And I wanted there to be an in-story reason for that, so that the players, when they're building their characters and when they're building the party overall, they can coordinate more and say, oh, well, we need these roles filled. And as part of my player's guide that I developed for the campaign, I came up with my own roles, because when I started really thinking about the roles needed in a adventuring party in Primordia, I realized that it wasn't about the 4 classes: fighter, thief, mage, cleric. It wasn't even about the tank, heals, DPS. The real roles came down, really mapped really well to the skills in the game. Things like survival is a role that we need. Stealth is a role that we need. Perception is a role that we need. Arcana is a skill someone's got to have. And so I wrote up my own party roles that were based more on skills than anything else. And so those are the kinds of things Druinda was thinking about when she pulled these player characters together. And it even let me, like I told the player characters, I said, you guys can even coordinate on your languages, because you were handpicked from a fairly large pool of people. So that could have even been a parameter that Druinda thought about when she selected you for this team, was, well, what languages do people speak? And let's have the most languages represented that we can. So it allowed me and the players to do more of what in a lot of campaigns would be called metagame stuff, like, oh, let's coordinate what languages people speak. Let's coordinate what spells people select at the beginning of the game. Let's coordinate what classes people are playing and all this stuff, so that we have a party, just like a heist team from Ocean's 11 or Leverage. We have a party where it's very clear why every person is there. It's very clear what everybody's role is. And together they can handle pretty much anything that comes their way. So, I actually like especially when it comes to party creation and character creation, I like that kind of coordination, but I also like there being a way that makes sense in the setting and in the story, so it isn't metagaming. So I was really happy when I came up with this way to kind of do all these things all at once with this NPC Druenda. So that's the basic setup for the campaign. So this is kind of the order that I did it. I came up with the general idea, what I wanted to do. I want to do some West Marches stuff. I want to explore the world. I want to get away from Elandria, but at the same time have Elandria be at least somewhat accessible as needed. I want the player characters to start out as kind of free agents, but then become members of the guild. I want them to be a very capable and specialized team that works very well together. And I also, on top of all of this, I have a story. Well, I have a few stories actually. And you know, something that happened with this campaign is I've been working over the past 2 to 3 years. I've been working on 2 or 3, and I say 2 or 3 because it varies how much these tie together into the same thing or not. But working on like ideas for 2 or 3 different campaigns in Primordia. And with this campaign, I'm actually pulling all those ideas into one campaign. So the one idea is the whole West Marches thing. Another idea is this very high level story. And by high level, I mean high level as in high character level, but also high level as in like epic fantasy, world affecting, good versus evil kind of stuff. So I have this very high level story as well that is part of the campaign and is I've talked about in the West Marches episodes how I feel like West Marches are awesome for first tier play, are pretty cool for second tier play, but once you get to third tier, you've kind of outgrown West Marches style play, I think, and by fourth tier, there's no way you're doing West Marches anymore. And you know, there's discussion in the books about the tiers of play and the kind of adventures you'd be going on different tiers of play and how, you know, you're always raising the stakes as you advance through these tiers of play. So this actually works out really well for my campaign that we can start out with this very West Marches exploration style campaign for the low tiers. But as we get in the mid and high level, we can transition into this more kind of epic story. But the awesome thing is I know right now what the epic story is. I mean, I don't know how it ends, but I know, you know, the basic parameters of it. So I can start setting it up right now. I can start foreshadowing it right now, which indeed I have. There are things, and it'll be really fun to do a video once none of this is spoiler anymore and point out all the things that were Easter eggs or foreshadowings or hints of things to come. And there are things all the way down to things that happen in the preludes, things that happen in the first couple sessions, things even that happened like before character creation and things I told the players and all this stuff. There are things going on there that will not pay off until like higher than 10th level. And it's a gamble to do that, you know, and I usually tell GMs, you know, don't, you know, if you have a really great idea, use it now because you never know that your campaign's going to get wherever. Don't say, oh, I'm going to do this thing when the players are 15th level. Do it now if you can. So I'm going against my own advice here. But it'll pay off really well, right? If we can keep the campaign going and we get there, that moment when the players start realize what's been going on this whole time that they didn't know about, that's been going on behind the scenes, it's going to be an awesome payoff because it was such a long con, so to speak, because there was so much time between when I started dropping those hints and when they were finally able to put the pieces together. The longer that time can be without people forgetting what's going on and losing track of it, the bigger payoff that's ultimately going to be. So yeah, there's something about this campaign I'm super excited about. And yeah, it'll be a lot of fun once that's all revealed and we can go back and I can start pointing out all the hints I gave in the very first session and the very second session and even in the preludes about what's coming and what's going on behind the scenes. But I can't talk about that right now. Not unless I want to wait a year to release this video, which I don't. Excuse me. All right. Just looking through my notes here. So we've got this lone village out in the wilds, a few days from the city. Somehow it survived on its own. The player characters are brought together by this member of the guild, Druinda, who is the one who had the vision, which, by the way, Druinda was burned by Dragonfire years ago, which is what ended her adventuring career, and was blinded by that. And so she is the very cliched blind seer. But, you know, in a lot of creative media, we avoid cliches, but in D&D, we tend to embrace them. And the blind oracle is a cliche that I definitely wanted to embrace for this. So that's totally who this character is. So she has this vision, or this dream actually, of the and I'll just say her having prophetic dreams in itself is foreshadowing and hinting of things to come down the road. But anyway, she has this dream about this village, puts together this group of people to go investigate it, and sends them out to find this village. So this is a dangerous mission, but she's found people that she thinks together can be successful. So now that I've got this basic setup to get started, my next step is the village itself. So I need a village for the player characters to go to and find. And I can talk about this now because at the end of our second session, they saw the village. So it's now no longer a spoiler that the village is a real thing. So I need to come up with the village. What's in the village? What's it's like? What's it's like? What is it like? What are NPCs in the village? Stuff like that. I need to figure out the region and regions around the village that eventually the player characters will explore. And just start filling in blanks and start fleshing things out. So I decided that the village itself is in a region called the Misty Wood. And one of the first things I did for this campaign, because I knew I wanted it to be wilderness exploration, at least at the beginning, is I wanted there to be different regions around that can be explored. And I started out just making a list of cool sounding names of places. And as I got a pretty good sized list, then I started making a really rough map of here's the village and this is there, this is there, this is there, and just picking the best things that I like the most from that list to be the names of regions and places that eventually the player characters can explore. So the region that the village itself is in is called the Misty Wood. The nearest region other than the Misty Wood to the village is the Fairy Forest. And there are more regions and stuff that we'll talk about later. But again, I don't want to spoil stuff. And the players haven't found out about the Fairy Forest yet, but once they start talking to NPCs in the village, they'll hear about the Fairy Forest. And it's a place nobody goes because it's the Fairy Forest. So the village does exist. And at this point in the campaign, the player characters have found the village. So their next task will be to find out how it survived on its own for 5 years and report back. So this is a secret, basically. I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to spoil anything, but this is a secret. This is a mystery to investigate. How is this village here? How has it survived all on its own? And it's going to be the player's task to solve that mystery, to answer that riddle. Now, I know what the answer is. I come up with that. I'm not going to share it now for spoiler reasons. And there's tons of other stuff to talk about anyway. But we will discuss that later as the players discover it. So as I said, I also have another storyline that's going to come into play later in the campaign, probably around second or third tier, somewhere in there. So I don't know exactly when. I don't plot out every game session forever. I just make very broad, rough, kind of skeletal outline plans. And then as we get closer and closer to a specific thing, I develop it more to allow as much flexibility as possible for player choice and to let the players take it where they want to take it, while at the same time having enough that I can kind of know where we're going. I decided to do a prelude with each player because it's a homebrew world, to make sure that they understood their character, their race, their class, how they fit in the world, what the world is like, what the environment is like, all that kind of stuff. And so that we could flesh out their backstory and so that I could know the character, get to know the character so that I can bring in more from their backstory and just get them really well grounded in the setting. And it was also a way I thought that I could maybe give each player different pieces of information that they can later pull together. Now, I might be a little bit undermined by the fact that all these preludes were recorded and are up on the YouTube channel, and I think at least some of the players have watched them all. But it's the nature of the beast. No matter what you do, there comes a point as a player where you have to keep player knowledge and character knowledge separate. So that's just unavoidable no matter what you do. So, and also I don't know how well I did it sprinkling things like that in the preludes. We'll have to see. So like I said, I'm not going to reveal this other storyline right now, but I will later. So, like I said, I work mainly from an outline or bullet points or whatever. And I leave a lot of blanks, whether I'm developing a place or an NPC or a story or an adventure. I try to leave as many blanks as I can while still having enough structure to hold everything together to allow for interesting things to happen during the actual game and things that come from the players. So we'll talk a little bit about the prelude. So each prelude, the goal of each prelude, again, I always have a purpose, a goal for everything I do. So the purpose of the prelude is to establish the character's place in the city of Elandria. How did they come to be there? Because if a lot of the players are playing non-human races that came from somewhere else. So for those characters like Phoebe's Furbolg character, we need to figure out, well, how did your Furbolg character come to be living in Elandria? What's their life been like up to this point? Also during the prelude, I introduce each of them to the character Druinda, who is the NPC tying everyone together at the beginning and the one that recruits them into this adventure. Establish how they know her, what kind of relationship they have with her up to this point. We'll also, if it's not obvious through the choices they make in the character that they build, we'll figure out what's this character's special skill. Why were they picked by Druinda to be part of this group? I'm also, as part of the character creation and the character concept part of things, I'm asking each player to choose a god for their character. Now, this doesn't have to be a quote patron deity. It's actually really rare, almost unheard of, for a person in Primordia to have a patron deity. Unlike most of the D&D settings that we're presented with, Primordia is actually a polytheistic setting. Instead of just saying it's polytheistic, it really is. Patron deity is a monotheistic idea. Patron deity doesn't really make sense in most polytheistic setups. We have patron deities, I would say, because we have clerics and paladins. And clerics and paladins, the very concepts of clerics and paladins come from monotheistic religions, not polytheistic ones. So there's our disconnect. There's our problem right there. But this is a problem that can be fixed through world building if it's something that bothers you, like it does me. So in Primordia, and I discuss this more on Game Master's Journey in more detail than I'm going to go into here. And I think I actually talk about it in the setting video, the first video in the series. In Primordia, people are polytheistic. People worship all the gods. There are 18 gods in the pantheon. There's only one pantheon in Primordia. Everybody worships the same gods. Doesn't matter what race you are. There's 18 gods. That's it. Everybody worships all of them for the most part. The idea is that the gods are jealous. They're kind of petty in that way. And a god does not appreciate other gods getting precedence over themselves. And the gods, the way I envision it is when someone prays to a god or gives an offering to a god, or something like that, they are sending a sort of energy to that god. And it's actually this energy that is what makes a god a god. This is why gods who are no longer worshipped and are forgotten basically die, and their bodies drift on the astral plane, right? And they can be reawakened if someone starts worshiping again and builds a cult around them, and they get enough people worshiping them, the god can reawaken, right? So that's why, because this worship is sending energy to the gods, and that energy is what makes a god and sustains it. Without that energy, they either become inert, like the dead gods on the astral plane, or they're not a god anymore. They might not become inert. They might still be around doing things, but they're no longer a god. So people send energy to the gods when they pray, when they worship, things like that. The gods know this, and they can see it. They can sense it, the gods of Primordia. So a god of Primordia knows how much energy they're receiving from any given person. And they also know how that compares to energy the other gods are receiving from that same person. So there's 18 gods. Let's say I'm the god of war, and this one person prays to me and makes offerings to me all the time and kind of ignores the other god. They have me as a patron deity in D&D terms, right? Well, I, as the god of war, know that all their energy is coming to me and not going to the other gods. The other 17 gods also know that this particular person is sending all their energy to the god of war, and they're not sending any to us. So that one god, the god of war, your quote patron deity, might maybe notice that and be like, oh, that's cool. I'll reward this person for putting me above the rest. Might happen. Probably won't. Might happen. However, the other 17 gods will notice that they are not getting their due from you. They're not getting that tithe from you that they're supposed to get, and will notice that you're sending it all to one god. So maybe you're on the good side of one god, but you're almost definitely on the bad side of the other 17. So that's simple arithmetic, right? Do I want to piss off 7 gods in order to be in favor of one god? Math there doesn't seem to be very favorable to me, right? Especially when the gods are more likely to notice a slight against them and react to that because they're jealous of one another and in competition with one another. They're more likely to notice you not giving them their due than the god that you're giving everything is likely. Well, they'll notice it, but they're not as likely to reward that because honestly, they don't care. They're getting their juice from you. That's all they care about. They don't really care. They've got bigger things going on than what you're doing. So because of this, and because the gods of Primordia are roughly equal in power, there aren't lesser gods and intermediate gods and greater gods in Primordia. They're all on the same level. Because of that, people worship all the gods, and people do their best to honor all the gods equally. That is the only way, or the best way, to not offend any one particular god and to be on the good side of all the gods. So this whole idea of having a patron deity is not something that happens. In fact, the only time it happens is with player characters, honestly, for the most part, or maybe some very special NPCs. And even then tends to only be, clerics, paladins, druids, rangers, right? The quote divine characters where having a quote patron deity is kind of part of their character concept. those are pretty much the only people in Primordia who have a patron deity. And those people are basically gambling that their patron deity is going to protect them from the other 17 deities. And if you're a cleric or a druid or a paladin or something like that, maybe you're special enough and influential enough and powerful enough and important enough that your patron deity is actually like, okay, this cleric that worships me, I'll kind of put my protective hand over him and keep the other gods from messing with him. But even then, remember, you're talking one god versus, I don't have enough fingers, 17 gods, right? And they're all equal in power. So it's not like I worship the god of war and he can take on all 17 gods by himself. No, that's not the way it works. So even a cleric in Primordia doesn't have to have a quote patron deity. They have one deity that their spells come from, but they could still worship and honor the deities fairly equally and just that one deity slightly more, as opposed to this concept of a patron deity where, this one deity is kind of the end all be all for you and you're just paying lip service to the rest of them. So getting back to huge tangent there, getting back to the player characters picking a god. So I told them, I'm like, it doesn't have to be a patron deity and probably wouldn't be unless you're, one of those classes that the patron deity concept's kind of built into the class. But I want each of you to have a god that for whatever reason, you have a special, I don't want to say relationship because that conveys the idea of a two-way street, and it's not necessarily a two-way street. It's probably a one-way street, but you have a special fondness for this one god. It could be that it's a patron deity. It could be that this particular god's agenda, their goals, kind of what they stand for, it just really resonates with you and is what you stand for. So it's kind of like worshiping yourself in a way. It could be that. It could be that something happened in your past that you feel like that god blessed you and you owe them for that. So the example I like to give is maybe you were in a battle and it was your first battle and your side lost and everybody died but you, and you feel like you were protected by the god of war. Like the god of war, for whatever reason, blessed you and protected you in that battle. And so now you have this, special affection for the god of war and kind of honor the god of war a bit more than the others. Again, it doesn't have to be a patron deity, just one god that you're especially have a special affection for. I guess that's a good way to say it. Could be that, yeah, like it could be that you feel like you were blessed by the god. Could be that you just particularly like what that god stands for. Could be a family thing, like maybe historically your family has been kind of worshipped one god a little bit more than the others. But I wanted everybody to pick a god in that way. And I wanted the god to kind of fit their concept. Like it makes sense that this character like kind of digs this god, right? And as far as the reasons for that, I didn't give any reasons because this is one of the many things that will be revealed later in the campaign. But that was something I wanted players to think about when they came up with their characters. And I wanted them as much as possible to avoid multiple characters picking the same god. All right. So we talked about all that. I also, and I will talk more about this later, but just for completeness, I tried out a different character creation system. So I pretty much always, I think with 5th edition, I've used a combination of the point buy and a stat array method for determining ability scores. I don't have people roll. And actually the stat array and the point buy both use the same mat. So they're compatible. So you could build the stat array with the point buy, like they're equal. So it doesn't matter if player 1 chooses point buy and player 2 chooses stat array, they're the same. So I played with that a little bit just as kind of an experiment. So instead of giving them 27 points to spend, I gave them 30. And I made the stipulation that instead of every score having to be a minimum of 8, it had to be a minimum of 10. So basically, if you do the math, I basically gave them the points to raise that 8 to a 10 and gave them an extra point to spend, however. Part of the reason of this is I wanted to play with giving more points for the point buy and what that would do as far as the power level. Is it really going to unbalance things if I do that? And also kind of test, how many more points can I give them before it gets out of hand? And so I think, and I know Wizards uses this approach that, well, actually, no, they use the opposite approach. Never mind. But I think when I'm doing something like this, I'm going to do in a campaign, I like to be conservative, which is to say I make it lower powered. And then if I need to, I can dial it up. Because I found that, like, for instance, if I make a new race and I give them racial abilities and I later decide I need to tweak it during the campaign, players are much less likely to be upset by that if it means a buff to their character, if something got better, than they are if it means a nerf to their character or something isn't as good as it was before I changed that. Now, Wizards, for whatever reason, if you look at their Unearthed Arcana, they actually go the other way. They tend to design things overpowered at first, and then through playtesting, dial it back. And I'd love to know why they do it that way. I think if you're playtesting in like one-shots and stuff like that, that's a fine way to do it. And then, it's like you're rewarding people for playtesting, right? It's like, well, you don't have to worry about if you play something playtesting that you're going to suck compared to everybody else. If anything, you're going to be overpowered compared to everybody else. Case in point is the Lore Master, as it stands right now, which one of my players, Danielle, is playing a Lore Master, is probably a bit overpowered compared to the other wizard types. So when we see the Lore Master in Xanathar's Guide, it'll probably be dialed back a little bit. But since I'm playtesting in a long-term campaign, I'm going the opposite approach because I feel like it'll create less havoc in the campaign that way if I start conservative and go from there. So adding 3 points, probably, my theory is it's not going to matter. Basically, they don't have an 8, they have a 10 instead, which, mathematically means instead of a -1 on something, they've got a 0. So I don't think in the long haul that's really going to even be a noticeable difference, but we'll see. So, and the array for that is 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, instead of 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. And again, I preserved that math relationship, so my stat array and the 30 point buy are the same. Also, during the prelude, I gave each character a +2 to Constitution. As far as a mechanic reason, it's just so that they can have a little more hit points and be a little hardier, because I like to make the game challenging. And because of what I'm wanting to do with the story, I wanted to hedge my bets a little bit that they survive the first few levels, because that's where most player characters die in my experience. And with the amount of work we've put into the characters, I don't want them dropping like flies in the first few sessions. And there's also, because I like to have, you probably noticed, I like to have story reasons for the mechanical things I do. And there is a story reason for that I will reveal later. During the prelude, I'm also giving each player character a magic item. This will hopefully be an item that's iconic to their character. And I've talked about this on the podcast a lot too. But one of the problems I see with D&D, how it's often run, is, and this was worse in earlier editions. It kind of peaked in 3rd edition, I think, as far as how bad it was, but it's still a thing where, like let's just picture a fighter uses a longsword. It starts out, he's got a mundane longsword, say around 3rd, 4th level, he finds a +1 longsword. Then around, 10th level, he finds a Frostbrand longsword. And then around 15th level, he finds a Vorpal sword, right? Now, already this isn't nearly as bad as it was in 3rd edition, where you're getting an upgrade almost every other level, but it's still like that fighter has had, maybe 4 different swords through his career, which for some character concepts, that's fine. Who cares? But for someone that wants to play the concept of, I use my ancestral family sword or something like that, or the idea of because in my world of Primordia, adventurers are famous. They're famous like rock stars and movie stars, and professional athletes are famous in our world. And their teams, their parties are famous, just like rock bands are famous, or sports teams are famous, right? Like you don't just know, who I don't know. I'm blanking on names, right? Like you don't just know who Tom Petty is, right? You also know who the Heartbreakers are, right? That kind of thing. So adventurers are famous in Primordia. So there's also the idea of, not only is this warrior well known, but his sword is known, right? Like we all know that King Arthur wielded Excalibur. I'm trying to, I think Gilgamesh's sword had a name, but I can't remember what it was. But anyway, a lot of, in our stories and mythology, a lot of heroes have named weapons that are known, like Sting, right? From Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Well, it kind of breaks that concept down if you're changing weapons every few levels, right? Like, if King Arthur got a new sword every few months, we wouldn't know who Excalibur was. But since he always had Excalibur, we know what Excalibur is, right? So that's kind of, I see that as a possible issue, at least with some character concepts. And, as the system's presented, it's kind of like, how do you get around that, right? Like if I want to play the warrior who uses his family's ancestral sword, I'm either starting out with a mundane ancestral sword, and at 20th level, I'm still using a non-magical weapon, or I'm starting out, with a Vorpal sword at 1st level, or, which isn't ideal either, right? Or I'm starting out with a +1 sword or whatever it is, but eventually I get to a point where it's kind of underpowered, and maybe I find a sword in a dragon horde that's way better, but I'm torn whether I want to use it or not, because it's like, well, story-wise, I'd use my ancestral sword. So there's actually a pretty obvious solution to this problem. And I came up with this solution for myself back in 2nd edition. But other people have come up with the same solution because, again, it's an obvious one. And that's to have magic items that are not static as far as their power level, but instead their power level changes based on the power level of their wielder. Basically, as the character levels up, so does the magic item. And I did a write-up on this system that I came up with for 5th edition way back when, and it's in the Primordia design diaries that the patrons get access to. And in Primordia, I call them relics. It's a specific class of magic items, and it's actually pretty easy to do this the way they've built 5th edition, to say, okay, this item has these properties at this level and these at this, and so on. So that is one possibility for an item that changes, is that it's a relic, which is an item that is just created that way from the beginning. Another possibility we could maybe explore in this campaign is taking an item that isn't magical and making it magical, or taking an item that's magical and expanding its capabilities. Now, this is something that is not normally possible. So it's something that would involve some higher level stuff, like intercession of a deity, or using ancient powerful magic that's been lost, or something like that, or an artifact or something. So the idea of these magic items, and this is a tiny bit of a spoiler to players, but I've basically told them and hinted at it anyway, is that there will be opportunities throughout the campaign for these items they're starting with to grow in power and become cooler. So I told them that because I wanted the players to, the idea is, when you're 20th level, what's your favorite item, what's your favorite magic item that your character has? That's what I want to give you at first level. I want you to have that item for your entire adventuring career, whether it's your sword or your shield or your armor or your alchemy jug or your broom of flying, whatever it is. When you're 20th level, what's your character's favorite item? What's the item your character might be known for, right? Like you're known and this item is known that you wield it or something like that. And that's what I wanted them to come up with. And the players all did a great job of coming up with something that was very closely tied into their character concept. So Steve, I haven't really been reading the chat. I will in a minute. Steve's in the chat, and Steve's character Malagar is a half drow elf bard. So Steve's item is he has a adamantine chain shirt that was his father's. Brett, I see, is in the chat. Brett is playing in Azamar Paladin, and his item is a celestial adamantine shield that was actually created or crafted by his mother, who is an angel, and given to his father, who since I can't remember if Brett and I decided if he died or he was wounded, but he's not fighting anymore. So Brett has the shield. Danielle's playing the Lore Master Wizard. Her item is an alchemy jug, which I've already augmented because unlike everybody else pretty much picked like a weapon or an armor or something like that that's useful in combat. The alchemy jug is really cool, but not useful in combat. So I gave it already kind of a power up so that it could do something a little more useful. And all of these right now are uncommon magic items. Let's see. We've got Phoebe is playing a Furbolg Druid. Her item is a staff, which is a light version of a Staff of the Woodlands. Let's see. Manny, who is also playing a bard, is his is a lyre, which is going to be an instrument of the bard. But it's not one of the ones in the DMG. It's one I'm making up on my own. Let's see, who am I missing? Craig is playing a cleric. His item is a longbow that was actually given to him by his deity. And Craig's character is actually interesting because his domain is a domain I homebrewed called the Hunt domain. His goddess is Dayanara, goddess of the hunt, wilderness, wild animals, foraging, stuff like that. And so this domain actually gives proficiency with the longbow. It encourages wearing light armor, and a lot of the domain spells are ranger spells. So it's kind of like a ranger flavored cleric. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I basically created the domain for this deity because I didn't really feel like any of the domains we had fit her really well. And I wanted each deity to have at least one domain that kind of fit them really well. So I came up with that domain and Craig's playtesting it for me. So that's why a cleric's magic signature magic item is a bow, if you're wondering. So yeah, I think Steve says his character's dad died too, so they can talk about it and drink over it. So yeah, you guys can let me know if I forgot one of the player characters, what their item is. But so everyone got the magic item. At this point, they're uncommon, but they have the potential to grow in power. And what I'm thinking is that won't be just a thing that happens, like you get to 5th level and boom, your item's better. It'll be more something that you have to do something to make that happen. So yeah, we'll figure that out. I haven't completely figured all that out yet. So once the preludes are done, we've got all the characters made. I've done a prelude with each of them to kind of flesh out their backstory and kind of figure out who is this character. Then I start looking at what the players have given me as far as their backstories, looking for any elements from that I can take and start weaving into the story or stories, I should say, of the campaign. So, in the beginning, the PCs are going to be looking for this village out in the wilderness, but periodically, I'm sure they'll return to Elandria. And so the first time they do return to Elandria, probably to sell loot, get item upgrades and stuff like that, as well as to officially join the guild. When they return, I can start to bring some of this backstory stuff into the game with like encounters they have with NPCs in the city and stuff like that. Also, any of the player characters that start play as a cleric, druid, paladin, or ranger get to begin play as members of a mystery cult. So each of the gods in my world have a mystery cult, and these are exactly inspired by the mystery cults of ancient Greece, like the Dionysian mystery cults. So you can Google that and learn all about the history of mystery cults. What is known, we don't know a lot because they were secret societies. So very little is actually known about them as far as what they actually did and what their practices and things were like. And in Primordia, these mystery cults are what the truly devout people do, you know? So it's kind of like in our world, like you've got the people that like go to church on Christmas and Easter, right? You know, that's like one level. You've got the people that go to church, like, I don't know, maybe they go every week, but that's about the only time they speak or think about religion, right? And you got that level. And then you got the people that like live and breathe the religion, right? And you can't get them to shut up about it, right? So similarly in Primordia, there's different levels of commitment to the gods that different people have. And I'd say your average person, it's more of a going through the motions kind of thing. It's like they do the offerings, they do the ceremonies, they do the rituals, they do the things they're supposed to do and don't do the taboos they're not supposed to do, so as to not offend the gods and avoid the gods getting involved with their lives. Because it's usually seen as if a god is involved in your life, it's far more likely to you to seem like a bad thing than a good thing. You don't want the gods to notice you. You want the gods to, as I spit all over the place, you want the gods to leave you alone, basically. So most people just kind of do what they think they have to do to stay out of the gods' bad side, to stay off their radar, and that's it. But you do have people that are for whatever reason, more devoted to the gods. And those people are the ones that join these mystery cults. Just like the historical mystery cults, they're secret societies. People don't even know, like if I'm a member of Dianara's cult, people don't even know I'm a member. Like it's that secret. And they certainly don't know where we meet, when we meet, and what we do when we meet. That's all very secret. As far as from a kind of gameplay perspective, the mystery cults are yet another source of quests and things that the players can decide. You know, again, I'm trying to make it very sandboxy. So not only can they say, oh, we want to go explore the fairy forest or some other thing nearby, they can also say, hey, you know, 2 of us are members of Dianara's mystery cult. Let's go do some quests for them so that we can increase our renown within that cult, increase our standing within the cult. As they do so in the DMG, we have a system for making organizations and how you can have different ranks in that organization. And you have a renown score that is kind of brownie points you've earned with that group. And as your renown grows, your rank grows. And with those different ranks, you could get different privileges. Well, so these mystery cults will give like kind of social privileges, like, oh, you have contacts in the mystery cults, and there might be powerful political figures that are a member of your mystery cult that you could call in favors from and stuff like that, especially if you outrank them in the mystery cult, right? But also at the higher levels of the cult, you'll actually get magical like spell-like abilities. These most likely will take the form of like cleric spells and things like that. So you might get the ability to cure disease like once a week or something like that. Or at a really high level, depending on the god, you might get the ability to raise dead or something like once a year or something like that. So it'll be a source for quests and role playing and just things to do. But it will also ultimately be a way that characters can get abilities above and beyond what they get from their character class and even get abilities very different from what they would normally get. So a wizard could maybe get some healing abilities if they wanted to. So that's kind of what I'm doing with the mystery cults, and anybody can join any cult. It's a merit-based thing. But the divine characters, the cleric, druid, paladin, ranger, can begin play as a member of their god's cult if they want to, which I think they all did. So again, I tend to focus on what I have to do when it comes to preparation. So I didn't do a lot specifically with the mystery cults until I knew what the characters were. And so I have two characters that are a member of Dianara's mystery cult. She's the goddess of the hunt. And I have one character who's a member of Elandra's mystery cult. She is the goddess of knowledge, civilization, and history. So now those are the two cults I'm going to work on developing, because the others don't really matter right now because no one's a member of them. All right. So that's basically all the prelude stuff. So, wow, how long have I been going? Holy crap. God, these things get long. Maybe I should I was going to start talking about preparing for the first session, but I think I should probably hold off on that because this is already getting super long. So where are we here? Oh, hang on. Here we go. So we'll do that next time. We'll talk about, we'll talk about session 1 in the next episode of this, which is actually cool because this one also doesn't have spoilers, because I was going to talk about it today because we're on session 2 now. So this is another one I don't have to sit on once I produce it. So let's see what's going on in the chat room, which I've been largely ignoring. Hello, Mac D. Hope you're still watching. It was a while ago that you chatted. Mac D says he or she, can't tell from the picture, really liked the West Marches episodes. Cool. Awesome. I'm glad, because I did quite a few. Glad people liked them. Let's see. Pokemon for Wheel of Time. Is that what that means? Says he's doing a level 10 Pathfinder campaign. Got to prep for rotating GM model. Interesting. Session tomorrow. Can you give me some NPC ideas, cool plot twists, etc.? Yeah. Maybe I did already. I hope so, because I don't think we have time for that today. That's a whole nother topic for which I am not prepared for right now. But that could definitely be something to talk about in one of these in the future. Out of the Cauldron says, interesting setup. What opposes the PCs other than the risks that come from wilderness exploration? That's a good question. What opposes the PCs? So right now, I'd say at least at the beginning of the campaign, the big oppositions to the PCs are nature, man versus nature, human versus nature, in the form of the actual environment itself. There is, of course, all kinds of monsters in the environment. There's not only all the normal stuff you would expect in a wilderness setting as far as monsters and things you could run into that might try to rip you into pieces. There's also things from other planes and other worlds that come through the various rifts that still occasionally open. Once they start interacting more with the village, there will be more conflicts from some of the NPCs associated with the village. And ultimately, as we progress through the campaign, and as the player characters make names for themselves and become forces to reckon with in the world, there will be conflicts coming from higher level. And by higher level, I don't mean like character level necessarily, although probably, but higher level organizations and entities and forces in the world itself that would be opposed to what the players are trying to accomplish. Steve and Brett say they both watched all the preludes. Yeah, so no secrets in the preludes anymore, but that's okay. Let's see. Jerome says, missed your live stream, but watch part 2 on YouTube. Great stuff. Thanks, Jerome. I appreciate it. Brett says that Steve's character Malagar is unbalanced, but that's because of the drink. Yes, he is physically unbalanced, perhaps even mentally, emotionally. We're not sure. Jerome says he doesn't think Lore Master will be in Xanathar's. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember what they said. I think they said something like each class gets 3 subclasses or more, with the exception of Wizard, which gets 2. And yeah, they've presented definitely more than 2 subclasses for the Wizard in Unearthed Arcana. So yeah, we don't know for sure that Lore Master will be in there. I hope it will be. But if not, I think it's within my powers to balance it if need be. I've really only been concerned with what Danielle's character can do right now, which right now she can change the element of a damage spell, which I think, definitely is very useful, but I don't think is necessarily overpowered. And she can also change the save that a spell calls for. And I think she can only do that once per long rest. That might be a little overpowered. That might be something that needs tweaked, but she can only do it once per long rest. So probably not. We'll see. Playtesting is needed. Let's see. Yeah. Sam is saying War Mage is going to be in Xanathar, which is, I don't think was nearly as cool as the Lore Master, but that's cool. Let's see. Jerome says, I wish they'd have a generalist type wizard. Well, that's what the Lore Master is. That's exactly what it is. They don't specialize in a school. They instead study all of them. And because that, they can do basically things you could do in 3rd edition with certain metamagic feats. Like I said, like changing the damage type of a spell, changing the save that a spell uses. At higher levels, they can swap out their prepared spells for other spells in their spell book, and ultimately can even cast spells from other spell lists, which is super cool. So they're more students of magic as a whole instead of focusing in on more on one school. So yeah, I personally, I'd say that's what the Lore Master is. Let's see. Steve says, let's hope they bring back the Illusionist. Well, we have Illusion School, especially. So I think that's what that is. So Brett says his character's father did die. Okay, cool. We kind of went back and forth on that with some different ideas, so I couldn't remember what the final edit was. Yeah, Jerome says he did the heirloom weapon thing too. Yeah, in I think it was 3rd edition, they had a thing called legacy weapons. They had a whole system for it, and yeah, and they very much did the thing where when you want to power your weapon up, it's like a quest. You have to go on to do that, which I really liked. I can't remember if that was a supplement. I think it was a supplement all of its own called Legacy Weapons. But yeah, that was some inspiration for some of the details of this. But yeah, I've been doing this myself since 2nd edition when I was running in high school. I came up and I actually shared this item with patrons quite a while ago. I had a sword, very original name, the Sword of Elven Heroes. That was the first of these type weapons or items, I should say, that I came up with. It was way overpowered. Oh my God. That's probably the second most overpowered magic item I've ever come up with. It was fun though. Steve says he thinks Vorpal swords at level 1 is okay. Definitely player perspective there, I think, Steve. Maybe not though. It depends on the campaign, right? Or the story. I could definitely see, actually it'd be kind of fun to run like a low level game and give everybody a legendary item just for shits and giggles. That could be fun. Let's see. Yeah. All right. So, thanks for the questions and the comments in the chat. And, if you have a comment or question that I didn't get to, or you're watching this later, you're not watching this live and you have one, feel free to put it in the comments for this video, and I'll check those out when I do the next one of these and try to address those as well. So yeah, I think the next one, let's see here. I'll talk about things I prepared for the first session, and then yeah, we'll go from there. So I'll try to do another of these in the next hopefully within the next week. I've got quite a few of these to produce because I want to get, we've already played 2 sessions and I want to discuss all that stuff while it's still fresh in my mind before it's too late. So yeah, I got a lot of these to crank out in the next couple weeks, and at least the next one I think I will be able to release right away. So maybe I'll live stream it. So let me know in the comments what you think about the live stream. If you like it done like this, or you'd rather it's more edited and polished. So yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll be back with another one of these soon. Our next session is this next Tuesday, which is October 24th, 5 p.m. Pacific will be our 3rd session. So if you're brand new, you've got time to get caught up by then. And again, we've got the 7 prelude videos as well as the introduction to the setting, which you don't have to watch to watch the actual play, but for people wanting more stuff to watch, there you go. And yeah, this is just the first of these videos, and more in the future, I'll be relying on questions and feedback from you as far as what you'd like discussed about this campaign. So have a great week, and I'll see you Tuesday, if not before. Well, that's going to wrap it up for episode 185 of Game Master's Journey. If you would like to get a hold of me, you can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at LexStarwalker. You can call the Game Master's Journey voicemail number and leave me a message. If your question or feedback is entertaining or enlightening or both, you might even hear your message on the show. That number is 951-GMJ-LEX1. That's 951-465-5391. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions for future topics, I would love to hear from you. You can find the show notes for this episode at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney, as well as links to connect with the Game Masters Journey community on Google Plus and Discord, where you can share ideas, questions, and stories with other listener GMs. Finally, if you'd like to support the show, the best way you can help us out is by becoming a patron. You can find out all about becoming a patron at patreon.com/StarwalkerStudios. You can also check the bottom of the show notes for all the other ways you can support the show, including purchasing a t-shirt or my D&D adventure, The Trickster's Labyrinth, at StarwalkerStudios.com, or by using my Amazon referral link when you shop on Amazon. I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I hope you have a chance to run your favorite RPG. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music, courtesy of Cloudwalker, Transboy, Renfield, Stanko, and Ish. See the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.